To order. Welcome everyone that's present. This is a remarkable turnout for a December meeting, and so I'm sure you have a lot of holiday spirit and Christmas zing in your efforts to be here before this important board. I would like to ask for a roll call here in a minute, but I'm going to introduce my colleagues here so you have a better understanding of who you're dealing with at this meeting here tonight. So over here is Mr. Kalsunas, who is a alternate to this board, and he's sitting as a full voting member of this board here tonight. This is Mr. Lambert to his right, and this is Mr. Agawas, who is the vice chairman of this board. And I'm Glenn Clark. I'm the chairman of this board. Over here is Mr. Desmond.
After everything we've been through, Glenn.
Yeah. I race from one thing to the other, and it's hard to keep things together. And of course, this is Mr. McCauley. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So these are the members of the board. I'll just say this at this point in time before I introduce the gentleman to the far side here, that we are not a 7-member board here tonight. So anybody that has business before this board has the right, not the actual absolute right, but the right to ask for a postponement of business until a full board is seated here. So if you have business before us, you can request, and it's on your shoulders to put that request before us to say, you're not 7 members, can we postpone this to the next meeting? There's never, ever a direct opportunity to guarantee 7 members are seated here, but you can certainly say, can we postpone it or kick it down the road, excuse me, to the next meeting where 7 members are here so we could fully vote amongst 7 members on your request to the board. And over here on the side dais is Mr. Evans, who is a city administrator with the city of Troy, and he will serve as our servicing staff member here tonight. And then Mr. Motsney is over to the very end, and he is an assistant city attorney for the city of Troy. And for tonight's board meeting, he will serve as our legal advisor. Without any further ado, I'd like to call on Mr. Evans to call the roll.
Mr. Clark.
I'm here.
Mr. Agawas.
Here.
Mr. Desmond.
Here.
Mr. Eisenbacher. Mr. McCauley.
Here.
Mr. Lambert.
Here.
Mr. Kaltsunas.
We have quorum, so we're going to proceed with business here tonight. So at this point in time, I'm going to call on our Vice Chairman, Mr. Agawas, to read the rules and procedures that we have adopted for our business, and this is going to be shared for you here that is visiting or watching at home to greater understand what we do here. Mr. Agawas.
The Zoning Board of Appeals is a group of 7 of your neighbors appointed by City Council to decide on requests for variances and other matters that are brought before them. A variance is a relaxation of the literal provisions of the zoning ordinance. Petitioners must indicate a hardship or practical difficulty with the land that would warrant the granting of the variance. The board will hear the items in the order that they appear on the agenda. When an item is called, the chairman will verify that the petitioner is present. Then the city administration will summarize the facts of the case. The petitioner will then be given an opportunity to address the board to explain the justification for the action requested. After the petitioner makes their presentation and answers any questions that the board may have, the chairman will open the public hearing. Any person wishing to speak on the request should raise their hand, and when recognized by the chairman, come up to the podium. The speaker should identify themselves with name and address, indicate their relationship to the property in question, such as next door neighbor, live behind the property, etc., and state whether they are in favor of or against the variance request and give reasons for their opinion. Comments must be directed through the chairman. Comments should be kept as brief as possible and closely pertain to the matter under consideration. Only one person will be recognized by the chairman to speak at one time. At the conclusion of public comments, the chairman will close the public hearing. Once the public hearing is closed, no other public comment will be taken unless in response to a specific question by a member of the board. The board will then make a motion to approve, deny, or postpone the request. In order for the request to pass, a minimum of 4 votes are needed. If the request is not granted, the applicant has the right to appeal the board's decision to Oakland County Circuit Court.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Nogales. So the point he's saying is 4 votes, things are approved. Without 4 votes, there's no approval. We're moving right on to item number 3, which is the approval of the minutes regarding November 20th, 2018. Are there any comments, questions, or concerns from a member of the board? Mr. Lambert.
Mr. Chairman, I would move approval of the minutes.
There's a motion for approval of the minutes that were presented. Is there a second? Mr. Kalsunas seconds that motion. Is there any discussion from a member of the board? Seeing none, Mr. Evans, we're prepared for a vote.
Mr. Agawas.
Yes.
Mr. Desmond.
Yes.
Mr. McCauley.
Yes.
Mr. Lambert.
Yes.
Mr. Kaltsunas.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes. So that motion is approved and agreed to. So we are now on to item number 4, approval of the agenda. So the agenda was presented to the public at the back of the room, also online. Is there any, are there any concerns, questions, or comments by a member of the board about perhaps moving things around on the agenda, or striking things, changing things, or granting new things? Not seeing any. The agenda as presented will be our set agenda for tonight's meeting. So we're moving right on to item 5A, which is a variance request related to 5844 Patterson. Mr. Evans, could you please present to us on this matter?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got aerial of the neighborhood. 5844 Patterson is right in the middle of this slide. This is a single-family neighborhood south of South Boulevard between John R. and DeQuinder. I've zoomed in closer on the property. It's outlined in red, 5844 Patterson. The subject matter involves installing a shed in the northerly portion of the property, which is, I've circled in red here on this overhead. And they're proposing to install a 10 by 12 shed. This is the site plan they've submitted, and the shed is proposed to be 1 foot from the rear property line and also 7 feet from the house. Now, the ordinance requires that the shed be 6 feet from the rear property line and 10 feet from the house. So in order to put that shed where they want, they're here seeking relief from the board. I'll turn it back over for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Are there any questions for city staff on this matter? Seeing none, we're going to request the petitioner to come forward to this podium here. Please identify yourself. Anybody that's associated can come up, but everyone needs to be identified and recognized.
Good evening, Mark Anderson.
I'm Alicia Tatham, wife, owner of the house.
So you're the owner and you're the owner?
I'm the owner.
I'm the husband. She's
Husband,
the owner
the owner of the home. And
She owns it and you occupy there, right? Okay, good for you.
And this is my son.
I'm Charles Warren.
Charles, thank you for coming, Charles. It's always wonderful to have young people here. So please share with us why you want to break the zoning ordinance.
Well, as you can see, we have a real odd-shaped lot. We do have Charlie, who is an amputee, 1 leg. He's got medical equipment and hand bike, a lot of hockey equipment, sled hockey. We do have a sidewalk leading right up to that area. To get it where the zoning board wants it, it would be unreasonable in the far back corner of the lot for him to be able to get in there in the wintertime or in nighttime to get to it. It's a lit area, there's a sidewalk right to it. We've gone around to all the neighbors behind us and in front of us, got approval, signatures, and addresses. Everybody says it's going to look great in the end. We have pictures here of what it's actually going to look like finished. I mean, it's going to be a beautiful shed, so it's not going to be an eyesore or anything to the neighbors. It's just medically inaccessible to him. That's the best place to put it for us. You can see him when he goes out there. Again, there's a sidewalk going to it. It's lit in the back. It's just a great place for him to have it. He can get his equipment out of it.
And he's starting to get more and more into sports, and we of course want to support that. But we took some pictures of some of the equipment. It's, you know, it's not small in any way, shape or size. So between his hockey sled, the practice hockey net, there's a big plastic board that he puts his sled on to practice shooting into and stuff. And then he has one bicycle right now that's got these exterior wheels, but we're getting a hand cycle for him and stuff. So it's just.
Have you shared these images with the board previously? Okay. If you can, whatever you haven't shared, please do over to Mr. Kalsunas, who over here to the far right, and he's going to pass them along to the board, and then they'll become part of the public record. Thank you.
Every other week we get more average this week we play sled hockey. So it's a lot of equipment. And we only have the 2-car garage, and right now we can't keep the garage. So we're trying to do the best for him.
And sir, I heard your father speak. You're an amputee,
Yeah.
and you play hockey. Wow.
Sled hockey.
Sled, well, regardless, that's more hockey than I've ever played.
There's
So,
a picture of us.
congratulations
sled.
to you for your endeavors in that regard, because that's, regardless, I don't understand sled hockey, but I'm sure anything related to hockey is a tough thing. So,
The rules
for any
are
young
just
person.
like regular.
I
It's a little scary
bet.
as a parent
I can
sometimes.
understand. So we're going to experience these photos for the next couple of minutes. Is there a member of the board who would like to inquire of these petitioners anything related to their request? Mr. Lambert.
Did you look at the feasibility of going around the other side of the house, or would that require you to put a sidewalk in on that
We have to
side?
put a sidewalk all the way around, and there's no door or access on that side of the home.
Okay.
Certainly on the left-hand side of the garage, we have a door leading out, or in the back corner of the house, right by the shed.
Okay. Thank you.
So I'm quickly going through these pictures. So this hand cycle, is this part of the game?
No.
No.
Okay, this is just something that your son uses.
Yeah, that would be for training over the summer, because
Okay.
you know, sled hockey is an entire upper body sport. You know, you have to use your arms and your core for that, and so the hand cycle would help maintain that fit.
A lot of sweating. Yeah.
Yeah, and stinky hockey players.
Right.
It's not my favorite thing.
Charles, do you have anything to share with us?
I don't think I already said it, but if it was anywhere, like in the middle of the backyard, for the snow and stuff, because I have trouble getting around in snow, and I wouldn't, it's like we have a fireplace there too, so we had like a foot or two of snow, probably it would have covered it, so I wouldn't see anything, and then I would have to put on a lot of stuff to get out there, and that's hard to do with the prosthetic.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for sharing. So those documents will be received by the city administration. They'll be part of the public record, as I stated. Are there any questions for this petitioner, these petitioners? Vice Chairman, no, Mr. McGaughy.
Is this a picture of something you've already started?
Yes, it's already been started.
Okay, so you've already started, and that's where it would be located?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
That's why I was curious from the proximity to the house behind it and everything else. Okay.
Yeah, it's a really odd shaped lot.
You were notified by the city that you can't do it after you started the
Yeah.
project? Yeah, okay. Mr. McCauley, anything else?
Nope, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for these petitioners? Thank you for joining us. If you could have a seat, I appreciate that. I'm going to call on Vice Chairman Agawas to share with us any documents that we've received from the public regarding letters or comments regarding this project.
Two additional things came outside of our packet today. One was against it, but they didn't list an address, so I can't say where in the neighborhood they are or who this person is. And one person is for it, and it's maybe a little further down the street. I think there's also 8 signatures in the packet that we do have, and I think the immediate 4 neighbors behind that lot, 3 of them said yes and 1 unknown, basically, as far as I could tell.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Agawas. At this point in time, I'm just going to ask any other board members if they have any comments before I open the public hearing. Seeing none, the public hearing is now open. If you'd like to address the board, please step to this podium and the microphone. You have to identify yourself and state to us your relationship to the property in question. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is John Lavender. I live at 5849 Patterson. It's directly across the street from Mr. Anderson. I came tonight to voice my support, my wife's support for this variance. I live right across the street. I can see the shed from any place across the width of my property. I'm the only neighbor that can see the shed fully. The neighbor on one side of me can't see it at all. The neighbor on the other side at 5857 can see it from about half of her property, and I know from talking to her, she's fully supportive of the variance as well. I saw the proposed appearance of the shed once constructed. It looks like a nice structure for that area. Other sheds in the sub, some of them are nothing more than 3 blank sheets of plywood and a door. Very utilitarian. This is not. This looks like a well-built structure that's there, and I'm fully in support of it. I have no issue with it. I don't think it affects my property negatively at all or anyone else. In terms of visibility, anyone driving down Patterson because of the tree line that's along that irregular side of the property and the garage, you have to be directly opposite it in the street to see it. You'd have to turn your head 90 degrees. So from a practical standpoint, nobody driving down the street will ever see it from a appearance standpoint. If Mr. Anderson had a rectangular lot, I mean, most of the rest of them in the sub are, we probably wouldn't be here tonight, but that seems to be, to my view at least, the only appropriate location for it. The back corner, while would probably fall within the ordinances, given the application and given the family situation, doesn't seem to be a particularly practical place for it. So my wife and I are very much in support of this variance.
So is that beautiful young lady that you were sitting next to, is that your wife that you were referring to?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Have a very good evening.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Anyone who would like to address the board on this matter, please present themselves to the podium and the microphone at this time. If you'd like to address the board on this matter, please step to the podium and the microphone at this time. I'm closing the public hearing and bringing this back to the board's attention for possible action. Is there any member of the board who would like to be recognized at this point in time? Mr. Desmond.
This is actually my neighborhood, and I'm pretty intimately familiar with this particular property. And due to the nature of this particular sub, it's kind of a weird center section around the school WASP that's there. So there's a lot of these irregular lots, and we actually see a lot of sheds that are what I would consider non-conforming that are up in that neighborhood. So, I mean, if they hadn't noticed this being built in the first place, it would have fit right in with the neighborhood as is. So due to the irregular lot, I move that we grant the variance based on the fact that the lot is irregular. And I mean, I just see no reason why not.
There's a motion by Mr. Desmond. Is there a second to the motion? Mr. Lambert seconds that motion. Is there any discussion by a member of the board, Mr. Lambert?
It's a question. I know lawyers like theoretical questions, so I'll give a question of Mr. In our statement of practical difficulty, there's no mention anywhere in there of the Americans with Disabilities Act, but clearly it would seem to be some implication for ADA rules that maybe that ought to be going forward should be included in the statement of practical difficulty. Is that something that would apply in this case or not?
No, not really. The variance standards are set by state law and the local ordinance, but as far as the ADA, that really has no bearing on it. Thanks.
Thank you.
So Mr. Desmond.
What about barrier-free design? Does the ADA supersede that?
I don't know the answer to that.
That would be a Michigan standard.
I mean, I could check that out and report back next week, but I don't know the answer right now.
Okay.
I would just quickly state that we're always concerned for people with disabilities, but that's not in the scope of this zoning board. But clearly this parcel is, as Mr. Desmond had stated, is extremely irregularly shaped. I wouldn't even say it's kind of like on the border of being considered yes or no. So I can understand that, and it's awesome that this family has a young man who likes to recreate and do what he likes to do in his spare time. But that's not outside the scope of what we're considering here. It is, if you look at 5844 on that image on the screen, this is a regular shaped parcel, so I'm going to be voting yes. Any other member? Mr. Evans, we're prepared for a vote.
Mr. Desmond?
Yes.
Mr. McCauley?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Mr. Kaltsunis?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Agawas?
No.
So the motion passes. Congratulations to the petitioners. And you have a wonderful new year of hockey and whatever else you do, cycling, all that. It's all very, very cool. So congratulations, and Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. So we're moving right on to item number B, which is 392 East Lovell. Mr. Evans, can you please prepare us for this information?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a residential property located in a neighborhood south of South Boulevard between Livernois and Rochester. It's on the south side of Lovell. In the overhead here, 392 is outlined in yellow. And that's a closer view of the subject property and some of the neighbors. Now, the applicant submitted a site plan, and it's actually flipped 180 degrees, so Lovell's at the bottom of this plot plan. What this involves is a proposed outbuilding to be constructed on the property, and the ordinance regulates the maximum size of outbuildings for residential properties, and it's a combination of lot area plus a hard figure in the ordinance. Now, when you do the calculation, this property is eligible for an outbuilding up to 1,026 square feet. The applicant wishes to construct an outbuilding of 1,680 square feet. So in order to do what he wants to do, he's seeking relief from the board. I'll turn it back over to the board for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Are there any questions of city staff on this matter? Hearing none, we're going to call on the petitioner. Please identify yourself and state for the record what your relationship is to the property in question.
Hello. Excuse me, I'm not used to speaking in front of people, so I get a little nervous. I'm the homeowner. My name's Daniel Schwayhat.
That's your property?
And that's my property.
Okay.
Well, basically, well, I don't know how to start here. Like I said, I'm nervous. I don't talk in front of people much. I do a lot of talking, but that's about it.
We're just your neighbors. It's okay.
Right now, there's 5 of us that live in the house, and my kids are going to school. So we've got 5 vehicles in this. Plus, you know, we have an older vehicle and a little boat that we use. And I'm basically playing dominoes, or not dominoes, musical chairs with these vehicles, just going in and out, in and out. We own a couple of businesses in the city. I've been here since I was a year old. And I've got a little room in the far back where I leave some equipment in. Well, the reason why I want to do this is I want to clean up the yard. It's going to give me better access to get in and out with my kids as they commute to school. And it's just going to alleviate a great deal of stress. You know, on top of it, it's going to clean everything up outside. I've spoken to all my neighbors. I've got more, but I only grabbed the first 5 that I've seen this morning. I have other letters that I picked up. I don't know if I give them to you, stating that, you know, they were an approval of it, you know, because they're going to help. I went to both sides of my neighbors across the street behind me. I've got 5 signatures here. I've got 5 more in my other truck. I just forgot to bring them with me, but I can produce those at any time. I honestly need this to stay in the city of Troy because we just have no room. It's basically impossible. If you come over and you drive down that street, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. You can't park in the street because it's like a freeway. It goes straight from Rochester to Livernois. I work with the police department for their speed zones, their traps, whatever. They can use my property whenever they want. They have in the past. We've parked in the street before. Cars have gotten hit. I mean, you need to, if anybody here is familiar with Lovell, it goes right out. I see Mr. Lambert is. It's a highway. So it's very dangerous for us to continue parking, especially at night, outside in the street. And I don't want my daughters parking out there and walking to their vehicles just so somebody else could get out and go to work. We leave at all hours of the night with one of my businesses. We plow snow in the wintertime, so you never know when you have to leave. So to have us jog these vehicles back and forth and to have my daughters park in the street, it scares me. I've had a dog that got hit while I was walking to the mailbox. I mean, it's a hazard. I brought it up a few years ago to put stop signs up there. They had one, it was a yield sign where Donaldson is. They changed it to a stop sign. They did the same thing a little further down, but it's just ridiculous, the traffic that goes through there. So I was hoping, to stay. For what my house is worth and what I could sell it for, I couldn't get anything in the city of Troy for that. We've been here, like I said, for 51 years. My father raised 6 kids here. We all live in Troy. There's 46 of us. I really don't want to walk away from my family. We love the city. I coached in the city for 18 years. I must have had 7,000 kids in the city go for free training through my backyard because it's so big. From the back of the house to the end of the lots, over 200 feet. So there was a lot of room to help the kids, which we still do. And I want my son and my girls, as they get older and they get married, they want to stay in the city. So I want them to continue the tradition that we started. I just don't want to move. My entire family's here.
If I could just share, we can't consider any of that.
Oh, well.
Walking dogs in the street and daughters in the street, we have to consider only what problem runs with the land.
Well, right now it's impossible driving in and out. If you look at the way the garage was built, it's offset, behind 10 feet of the house going in. And it's impossible getting in and out of this garage, first of all. It was constructed terribly by the previous owner. And I just want to alleviate and clean up the yard, clean up the house, and so forth.
Okay, thank you. If you have any documents to share, Mr. Kalsunas will receive them.
I can produce more, like I said.
Whatever you have to produce, need to produce now.
All right, well, sorry.
So,
well, I have half of them.
Meeting's now, not an hour from now.
Oh,
so
that's fine.
If you have anything else, please share with Mr. Kalsunas. They will make their way to the public record, which is Mr. Evans will receive them. Thank you. Any questions for this petitioner?
Yes,
Mr. Calling.
Currently, where do you park your boat?
It's right up in the garage next to the house east of us.
Okay.
And when we do that, then it's impossible to have more than one vehicle in the garage, and it's really hard to get it out. I mean, you get like maybe a foot between both sides to move one vehicle from in the garage to outside the garage because of the way it's offset.
Okay, so it's in the garage or is it in the driveway?
At this moment?
No, I'm saying where you normally park it.
Oh, in the driveway because there's no room in the garage.
Okay. And with the new construction, you're looking at moving that garage back 25 feet from the house instead of 10?
Yes.
Where do you park your car?
That one's in the garage, but then there's no room for anything else.
Right.
Like I said, it was poorly constructed, and
it's tight.
It's extremely tight. I mean, if you take a photo of it, you can't get your hand on either side, so it's impossible for us to even use the garage.
Any other member for this petitioner? Mr. Gullis?
Yes, sir.
What's the square footage of your house?
When I bought the house, we were at 1588. I put an addition on it, and I believe it was 350 feet.
Okay.
So it's just under 2,000 square feet.
Any other member for this petitioner? If you could have a seat.
Yes.
Thank you very much. I'm going to call on the vice chairman to share with us any public comment that's been shared with the board,
Nothing new.
other than what we received here tonight, which is now a part of the public record. So I'm going to open the public record or public hearing for anyone to address the board on this matter. So if you'd like to speak on this matter, please present yourself to the podium at this time. If you're here to speak to the board on this matter, please present yourself to the podium and be recognized. Final call for people to speak on this matter. Please present yourself to the podium at this time. Closing the public hearing on that item, and we're bringing it back to the board for possible action. Mr. Desmond.
Just for my clarity, this is not, there's no setback concerns here. This is exclusively tied to the size of the garage based on the size of the house. Is that correct?
Based on the size of the lot.
On the size of the lot, I'm
Right.
sorry. Okay. Is this tied to the monster garage ordinance scenario?
I would say ultimately this ordinance section was put in place because previous to the monster garage, there was no regulation limiting the size of outbuildings on property.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Desmond. Any other member of the board? Mr. Evans, I believe we're prepared for a vote.
We don't have a motion.
yet, do we?
We don't have a motion. I'm sorry?
Say, we don't have.
Yeah, there's no,
Motion, do we?
sorry. Mr. Lambert.
You're reading my mind, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I don't know if this is going to go anywhere, but I'm going to move that we approve the variance based upon the characteristics of the property. It's very narrow piece of property, that they are not of a personal nature. They were not created by the current or the previous owner, and it will not be harmful or alter the essential character of the area.
Thank you. Is there a second to that motion?
A second.
Mr. Desmond, second. So we do have an active motion before the board. Is there discussion?
I'll just.
Vice Chairman Agawas.
This is one of those where my heart is in one direction, but there's a bunch of red flags in my mind going off right now. Sure. I mean, I think I could go through each one and have an opposite point of view. It's one of those that tip a little bit. Some of the things feel like it's personal in nature as opposed to a hardship with the land itself. And just looking at the neighborhood, all of these lots are essentially the same size. They're long, they're narrow. They're not great, but there's not anything, specifically unique per se in that little area. And this kind of this feels to me like a want versus a need per se. And it's adding a garage that's going to be almost as big as the house itself, which means you essentially have the floor prints of two houses on one lot, which in my view might change the characteristics of the neighborhood because now you've congested maybe the property a little bit. So I think for me, I see it the other side where I don't see a strong practical difficulty or hardship with the property per se, if I had to divorce that from the want side of it.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Agawas. Mr. McGauley.
I agree with you. I'm concerned about the size of it, 60 feet long. To me, if I was a neighbor and I wanted to look down and I like to see backyards and open space area, I don't think that would be a site I'd really want to look at on a daily basis. And personally, I think that my personal opinion is if we looked at what our standards are and we look at what they could build there, and there was a cement slab added to the back to park the boat on, shrink wrap, that would adequately fit 3 cars, taking care of the one car that's in storage and 2 others at least, and plenty of space for other things. I'm familiar with lots like this, having grown up on one, and I can tell you that a lot of people did that. They would put a driveway to the back. There'd be a small something back there, but it wouldn't be that big, and there'd be a slab or something where they would accommodate some outdoor equipment if they needed to put some out there, like a boat, something like that, shrink wrap. So I'm really concerned, like Mr. Gauss is, about the size and the need, in a sense.
Thank you. My 2 cents really quickly are that it's wonderful to, one, have a boat, have extra things at a home. I agree with Mr. McCauley's statements that this is really a want, and Vice Chairman Agawas addressed this as well, and I don't see a practical difficulty with the land. I see a desire of a homeowner, and that's a good thing, to want to spend dollars to, a crew, a construction team, to spend dollars, which causes economic development. That's not anything we can consider here. So even though the gentleman presented himself very well here before the board, I'm going to be voting no. Any other member of the board? Mr. Evans, we're prepared finally for a vote.
Mr. McCauley.
No.
Mr. Lambert.
Yes.
Mr. Kaltsunis.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
No.
Mr. Agawas.
No.
Mr. Desmond.
Yes.
So that motion failed, and the petitioner had the right to request a postponement based on the fact that we're not 7 members, and we move on to item number C. Mr. Evans, can you please prepare us for 2984 Cedar Ridge?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This subject property is located in a single-family neighborhood on the south side of Big Beaver between Adams and Coolidge. Essentially, it's halfway between Adams and Coolidge. More specifically, it's located in the southeast corner of Cedar Ridge and Big Beaver. Now, they're proposing to build a single-family home, 2-story, 4-car garage. The zoning ordinance requires a 50-foot setback from the existing or proposed Big Beaver right-of-way, whichever is greater. Now, the master plan has the proposed right-of-way east of Cedar Ridge, which is everything to the right of this blue line, master planned at 204 feet. Said a different way, the 50-foot setback for anyone putting a house at 2984 would have to be start their 50-foot setback measurement at a point 102 feet from the center line of Big Beaver Road. Now, just east of Cedar Ridge is the dividing line, and the master plan calls for a 120-foot proposed right-of-way. So in this illustration here, these arrows illustrate the differentiation in right-of-way, and if we were to extend this line westward, they'd have to come another 50 feet south before they could start construction of the house. Now, they've provided a site plan also showing that, and I'll try to zoom in here so everybody can see, and this is in your packet. So the center line of Big Beaver's up here. The proposed right-of-way, according to the master plan, 102 feet here. They've got to go it's actually 102 feet to this blue line, and then they've got to go another 50 feet back. So everything south of this purple line would give them their potential building envelope. There's only 26 feet left. So they're in requesting a variance from the requirement that they maintain a 50-foot setback from the proposed right-of-way, and they're actually seeking a 50-foot setback from the existing right-of-way, which is set at 102 feet from the center line of Big Beaver Road. I'll turn it back over to the board for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Any questions for city staff on this matter at this time? Mr. McCauley.
So as I'm looking at that blue line, which is 50 feet away from the 102, is what they're proposing to use as their setback, to move the setback to that range?
Well, actually, and their setback is, let's see, I've got another.
What they're requesting?
Yeah, what they're requesting is actually illustrated best here.
Yeah, I liked your other picture.
Yeah. So this line here is the existing 102 right-of-way, and they're going to go 50 feet from it.
And that's what they're requesting, to be able to build up that 50-foot line.
Right, as opposed to having to conform with the 200, the larger right-of-way. I'm sorry, and I said that was 102. This is actually the 60-foot right-of-way here. Here, let me back up. So the existing right-of-way is set at 60 feet on their side. The proposed right-of-way would be further down, right here. So they need to maintain right. That's the 102-foot right-of-way.
Okay.
That's the 60-foot right-of-way. So they want to, what they're proposing is to be 50 feet
From the
60.
From the 102.
Actually, from the 60. This 102 is actually a, here, let me back up, is actually a call-out from the center line to there. The 60 is from the center line to that green line.
Oh, so they want to go 50 feet from the 60-foot.
Right, right.
Okay.
And that's what it looks like now.
Okay.
If we, let me back up.
And that,
So it would be from the existing, where the existing property line is now, and that's consistent with the right-of-way, master plan right-of-way just west of this property on the other side of Cedar Ridge. It's actually the border line where it goes from a 204-foot proposed right-of-way. Once you get west of Cedar Ridge, Big Beaver is only 120-foot proposed right-of-way.
so I'm just trying to visually put this in perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm looking at the 204 existing row there.
Right.
If that was the farthest that they could build north, would that be in is that approximation of what we're talking about, the area where they want to build?
Well, actually, if we were to extend this right-of-way line west, that's where we'd have to measure the 50-foot setback from.
Okay.
So they'd actually have to start, their setback from Big Beaver would be somewhere down here.
Okay.
And I'll try to illustrate that in another one, this purple line here. They try to illustrate that.
Okay.
So essentially, the way the ordinance reads now is any house put on this property would have to be
South of the purple line.
right south of the purple line.
But they're asking for a 50-foot variance so they could go up to the 202-foot line.
They want to go to the 102-foot line, which is right.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other member of the board for city staff?
Yeah, one quick question.
Vice Chairman Gauss.
I just want to see if I can tie this back to the zoning ordinance. Is this tied to that 406D1 language, talking about the 50 feet from existing right-of-way, the yard setback abutting said major arterial?
Right.
Arterial? Is that
Right.
the same?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so where does the 120 come into the zoning ordinance? Because I only saw the 50.
The 120 is where it is now, and the master plan says that in this portion of Big Beaver, east of Cedar Ridge, which would include this property because it's on the east side of Cedar Ridge, you need to start your 50-foot setback from the proposed master plan right-of-way, which is 204, or 102 on each side.
Okay.
Did I answer your question?
I think.
You can ask it again if you want. Well, I want to make sure you're clear because this is unusual.
Yeah.
We can circle back.
Yeah.
if you-
Yeah, we can always circle back, sure.
Any other member of the board? So I'm sorry, Mr. McCauley.
My concern is that, and I just don't know how this would work, this is kind of a weird situation, but when we've had to expand roads in Troy, we've been put in situations where we've had to condemn houses, and to be able to support the right-of-way. My concern would be, would this be a house of potential jeopardy that would all of a sudden be built? Then when we expand the roads, then we have to condemn it because it's in the right-of-way that we need to be able to build in.
Excellent question, and it actually segues. I've asked the city engineer and also road commission for Oakland County. This is a county road. They both have jurisdiction over future expansion of this road. Both engineers have opined that it's unlikely that this portion of the road will be expanded, and therefore they have no objections to it, and those comments are in your packet as well.
Okay. Just want to make sure.
Right.
Any other member of the board? So I'm going to call on Vice Chairman Nagawas to share with us any comments from the public that were sent electronically or in written form or...
Right. Speaking to that, the Road Commission for Oakland County said that they were okay with the potential proposal. And then I believe I have one other no and one other yes in favor for.
Okay, thank you. So at this point, I'm calling the public hearing open on this matter. So if you'd like to address the board, please present yourself to the podium at this time. Recognize yourself and state for the record your relationship to the property in question. Good evening.
My name's Kevin Hamilton. I actually purchased the property, not knowing that the fine red line went an extra 150 feet. So my issue is, obviously, I can't build for myself. It's my personal dwelling, not a business endeavor. I've looked over the paperwork. I see, I have it noted on, I think it's page 8 shows it, as well as, yeah, page 8 zooms in closer. It shows where the red line stops right at Cedar Ridge, which is like 150 feet. I know that they could possibly extend it, but I don't understand how they would go. You know, the median's here, it stops, the center median, it stops. They're going to extend it, what, another 30 feet, which makes me lose a tax-paying lot. I mean, it's already got a Sidwell number. It generates property tax. I'm just trying to build a house there, and if they do carry that 204, which is the 102, from the center line, I literally will have a 16-foot building envelope. So I just bought a completely worthless, unbuildable lot. I thought that being that where it's at on the corner, it was a big lot, nice spot, great area. I already live in Troy. Just thought it'd be a better area over on 16 Mile. I'm hoping that we can recognize that the line stops at Cedar Ridge, and where the median stops now is pretty much at the back part of my property. So I just don't see how they would ever do it, and I'm hoping that you guys can grant me this so I can build to move there and not have wasted a bunch of time and money. But I didn't know if there's any questions I could answer. I have a few things here.
I should have called you up before the public hearing, but
it's okay.
This is completely okay.
At first I thought you weren't calling me up. I'm like, all right, but whatever.
Half full, half empty, doesn't matter. But thank you for sharing.
If there's any questions, I can try.
Are there questions from the member of the board, a member of the board for this petitioner? Okay, thank you. If you could have a seat, appreciate it. We'll just keep the good times going by calling other members of the public forward. If you'd like to address the board on this matter, please present yourself to the podium and be recognized. If you'd like to speak to the board on this matter, please present yourself to the podium and be recognized. Final call for people who would like to be recognized on the public record on this matter. Please present yourself to the podium. Close out the public hearing on that matter and bring it back to the board's attention for possible action. Is there a member of the board who would like to be recognized? Mr. McCauley.
I would like to make a motion to approve the variance setbacks that the petitioner has asked for.
Second.
Moved and seconded by McCauley Desmond for approval on item number C. Is there any discussion from a member of the board? Seeing that we're not wanting to discuss, Mr. Evans, we're prepared for a vote.
Mr. McCauley?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Mr. Kaltsunis?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Agawas?
Yes.
Mr. Desmond?
Yes.
Motion carries. Congratulations. You have your variance. Have a very good rest of the year. So we're moving right on to item number D, 125 East Big Beaver. Mr. Evans, can you please present to the board on this matter?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is on vacant property on Big Beaver, the north side, just east of Livernois. And this is between Frankton and Troy Street, adjacent to Big Beaver. Now, subject matter involves a proposed restaurant at the site. Now, they were before the Planning Commission on December 11th, but because they need variances, the Planning Commission was unable to take any action. So whatever the board decides to do here, it's going to go back to the Planning Commission for final approval for a, I shouldn't say final approval, recommendation for a conditional rezoning. So this is the site plan that they provided with Big Beaver on the south. You see the side streets on either side of the site. And the zoning ordinance for this district does not allow parking in the front yards. Now, a front yard is defined as any yard adjacent to a street. So in this instance, there's 3 front yards, one along either side street and one along Big Beaver. They're proposing some parking areas along the west property boundary, and this actually better illustrates it with a hatched area where they need a variance. So this is the front yard area where they're proposing parking, so that's one variance they need. The other variance requires that the building has, in this district, has actually a build-to line, which is different than a setback line. It's actually required to be brought up so it's so it's 10 feet away from the front property line. So as you can see along Troy, it's significantly significantly more than 10 feet. So in order to proceed with what they want to do, they're seeking those 2 variances from the board tonight. I'll turn it back over to the board for any questions.
Mr. McCauley?
If I looked at that area would that extend even farther north up Troy Avenue, Troy Drive, that front yard setback for the other properties?
No, the front yard setback would stop at the building line, the northern building line.
Okay. So the parking would be fine?
Further north, yeah.
Okay.
Any other member of the board? So we'll call out the petitioner forward, or petitioner's representative. Please identify yourself and state.
My name is David Sawyer. I'm an attorney here in Troy. I have been for about 21 years. We began acquiring this property. My father, Tom Sawyer, started acquiring this property with Joel Garrett in the early 1980s. Some of you knew Mr. Garrett. He and his son were lost in a aircraft tragedy some years ago. And so my partners in this project are his daughter, Ann Sobey, and his son was also lost to them, Dale, and his wife, widow Natalie, is my other partner in this project. We've been to Planning Commission. I think we got a pretty positive reaction from Planning Commission on this project. Mr. Evans has indicated that the ordinance does not specifically address our situation. So it's a little vague as it comes to the setbacks and the parking. It directly addresses that there should be no parking in the front of the building, between the building and the street. And it talks about corner lots and says that where you have a corner lot, you need to put the building in the corner. What it does not address is a situation like ours where you have actually 3 fronts or 3 streets. And so as a kind of a broad interpretation, planning has determined that that these are all front yards, and they're kind of looking to have this ZBA tell them that this is, that they'll issue a variance on this. So if you look at this property and other properties in the area, so this practical hardship here is the fact that this property is fronts on 3 streets, and it's being, the interpretation is being made under the ordinance that these are all front yards. So the practical difficulty here is that it fronts on 3 streets, it's 3 front yards. Essentially, if you interpret the ordinance that way, it would have to be built to each street 10 feet, and you could have no parking in a side yard. Looking at the other properties in the area, you can see, and I don't know if Paul, you have that up. So directly across from our property here is another building. There are only 3.
Can I just ask?
Yeah.
Can you just share with us specifically where the property in question is?
Yeah, it's
on this map.
Okay.
I know Mr. Evans has it here, but
yeah,
please share here.
This is our property right here.
So this is Big Beaver.
This is Big Beaver Road.
And then that's Livernois.
Right here.
That's okay. I'm sorry.
Big Beaver Road. This is Franklin Street, Troy Street. and this is Lewis Lane. So there is actually only in the entire Big Beaver district that I'm aware of 4 properties that front on 3 streets like this. So the ordinance did not speak to this kind of a situation at all. This one, as you can see, this property here is one of the 4 with 3 sides. As you can see, it has parking on the side, and it does not build from end to end. Now, it was built before this ordinance was in place, but that is this current situation. This property here...
is that the Columbia Center?
No, the Columbia Center is across the street here where you have Stony River.
Okay, I see.
This is on the north side.
Gotcha. So that's the Liberty Center?
I think, no, Liberty Center is right here.
Okay.
This used to be Giffords Hoyam and Basso, so it is the northeast corner of Big Beaver and Livernois.
Okay, gotcha.
So interesting, this building also does not have, or has parking between the building and a side street.
So that's Kona and the new...
Kona is over here.
Okay.
Across Big Beaver. This is the north side.
I just think your map makes me think that everything is north of Big Beaver.
Yeah, so this is the north side of Big Beaver.
Yeah.
Or the going west. So down here you have Liberty and the hospital.
Okay.
Right here.
Yeah.
That's the spa.
It's the spa right here.
Okay.
So the spa has parking on the side and does not build to both street lines. It wasn't under the same ordinance. But
I understand.
Yeah. Okay. And then this building also has parking conceivably in front of the building, to the side, however you want to look at it. Interestingly, if you applied the ordinance that way to this building, which covers an entire block, has 4 streets, there'd be no rear yard on this, and you couldn't have any parking on that building.
Right.
So if we took a literal and harsh interpretation of the ordinance. That's our hardship, is essentially an interpretation of the ordinance that calls for us to have essentially 3 front yards, creates a situation where we need a setback, we need a variance in order to not have the building run from street to street, which would be impractical and create an impractical building. And we'd like to have a portico on the side with parking on the side, like what you see at Eddie V's. So that's another property which also has that. I think Dave might have a picture of Eddie V's as well.
In his magical bag of tricks, he's got a picture.
Very, very similar to what we have now. It does not have 3 streets.
Right.
It has 2. And so the building is in the corner here. You have your portico here, and then you have parking here along the side. So that's what we're looking to do here. Practical use for this, and creates a practical hardship. Then there's one property directly next door to us. Dave, I don't know if you have that building on there.
I just have down the street.
Yeah, sir, you can't share anything from the gallery there. You have to be at the microphone if you're going to make any statement.
What's this one? Oh, this is...
Yeah, sir, you cannot speak unless you're at the microphone. Thank you. Thank you.
This is to the east of our property, so I believe it's 1-2 streets down. This is known as the Kilmer property. This one has 2 streets, and this is Bahama Breeze right here. And this property actually has parking in the front between it and the street, but again, was not under the same ordinance. But the purpose in that is just to show that it doesn't change the character of the area, that every other property in the area has side parking and doesn't stretch from road to road. You see that with Granite City, does not stretch from end to end of that property. The new one at Columbia Center does not stretch from end to end. It has parking on the side. So we're essentially saying that's our practical hardship, and that's why we're looking for the variance here today. The specific factors, characteristics making compliance difficult, directly related to the properties that the parcel is directly bordered by city streets on 3 sides, leading to an interpretation that the property has 3 front yards and no side yards. So we're asking for a variance to acknowledge it, essentially, that we have a side yard there. The characteristics which made compliance with the dimensional requirements difficult shall not be of a personal nature. Obviously, we didn't put the streets in there. So the characteristics which made compliance with dimensional requirements difficult must not have been created by the current or previous owner. Again, it's city streets. The proposed variance will not be harmful or alter the essential character of the area in which the property is located, will not impair an adequate supply of light and air to the adjacent property, or unreasonably increase the congestion in public streets, or increase the danger of fire, or endanger the public safety, or unreasonably diminish or impair established property value within the surrounding area, or in any other respect impair the public health, safety, morals, or welfare of the inhabitants of the city. My view is that it doesn't do any of these things. I mean, the variance that we're looking for here is essentially 14 parking spaces here, Dave? Yeah. 4 or 5 of which, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6 of which are the handicap parking spaces. So, in fact, it creates a safer situation for these individuals in that, you know, the handicapped park will be closer to the front door that's required by the ordinance, as opposed to having them have to park back here somewhere. To stretch the building from road to road would actually potentially create some sightline issues there on the turnout. So I think that also potentially is an advantage to public safety. It's not a particular fire hazard. So if there's any questions.
Thank you very much.
Chair?
Member of the board for this petitioner, it's Representative Mr. McCauley.
My concern is, and I don't know if you looked at this when you were looking at your design and egress into the facilities.
Yes.
With the single-family residential areas that you are bordering, the traffic concerns that have been brought to ours. What have you done to look at? I'm going to be honest. My concern is this. If I lived in any of those houses that border that, I would not be a happy cowboy.
Well,
and the reason being is that I don't want all that traffic in front of my house.
Right.
I don't want to look at cars out my front door in the parking lot.
Sure.
I don't want to deal with people at 2 o'clock in the morning, 1 o'clock in the morning coming out of the restaurant after they've had a great night at a beautiful restaurant, a beautiful meal.
I understand that.
My concern is, if you looked at moving like the other businesses, other restaurants along Big Beaver, their entrances closer to Big Beaver, so that way they weren't across from single-family residential, or in a place where that the natural egress would be out of the parking lot into Big Beaver Road instead of into the subdivision.
That's something the Planning Commission discusses.
Okay.
Kind of the variance here today is really...
What I'm asking is, have you guys looked at that?
We have, and I'll address all of your questions. I would just say that, you know, what we're seeking here today is a variance for this parking right here, and to not have the building go from road to road, and not an approval of the ZBA on the entire project. But to your point, which is well made, is that I've reached out to every home within 300 feet of the property. I've spoken with every neighbor within 300 feet. 3 of them came to the Planning Commission meeting. They are the 3 people most impacted by the project, the 2 that are directly adjacent to us on the rear, and the gentleman in the first house right here. So his house is already there, and their only concern that they expressed related to the second egress-ingress on the property, which is the northernmost egress-ingress on the property. And one of the things we're in discussions with the city about and with planning is whether or not that northernmost entrance should be moved over onto Frankton Street, so that the entrances that we have there, the one we have now is essentially across from the one that exists now there. And then the northernmost one, which right now is next to 3074 on Troy Street. We've discussed moving that over to the other side of Frankton. That is something that the Planning Commission is going to have to tell me that they want to see done, and the city planner's office, in discussions with traffic, are going to have to determine that they want to see done, because there is a light on Troy Street. So Troy Street has a traffic light, and Frankton Street does not have a traffic light. And the implication I got in the early stages of planning this project from planning was that they probably preferred to have the egress and egresses on Troy Street where there is a traffic light. I don't really have a dog in that fight. I personally probably think the Frankton Street exit is better in some ways because entrance and exit is because then cars that turn onto Frankton Street. We've discussed the possibility of putting no left turn signs or no right turn, no left, depending on where the streets are, to keep people from driving down those streets. Ultimately, these houses are on a street with a light that is, stone's throw from Big Beaver Road. So there is a lot of traffic there, and there's cut through as it is. But really, with the variance, what we're talking about here today is 14 spaces. Dave, is that the number right?
Yeah.
14 spaces. So I have discussed with the neighbors. They have no complaints about the project itself. I knock on every door within 300 feet. Gave them a $100 gift card to the Cooper's Hawk out at Partridge Creek because I wanted them to try it and say, hey, I wouldn't, this is a great restaurant. To your question about late nights, Cooper's Hawk's kitchen closes at 9:30 Monday through Thursday, and 10:30 on Friday and Saturday, and 9 on Sunday. So the kitchen closes at those hours, and then, they'll serve who's ever there, and they'll leave. So generally, that's about an hour. So for the most part, the customers will be leaving with about an hour afterwards. The bar that's there closes 1 hour after the kitchen closes. So we had a lot of options for this property. And we waited, obviously, since the 1980s for this project because we wanted to do the right thing here. And we wanted something that's good for Troy. The factors, do you have those? The Big Beaver District factors?
Are you talking about?
Okay. So the Big Beaver District factors which were taken into account establish a development paradigm in which buildings and modifications enhance the character of the existing built environment. We feel that this project really connects to Kilmer and the other projects and kind of closes the gap here along 16 Mile Road and kind of completes the project. This is really one of the last great parcels here. Orient building entrances as storefronts to the street to add visual interest, increase pedestrian traffic, and to reduce crime through increased surveillance. We've done that. The building's got a lot of glazing in it. Enhance a sense of space and contribute to the sustainability of the city. These restaurants are, I don't know what people are going to be doing in 20 years, but I know they're probably still going to be going out to eat. And in a world of category killer Amazon, we don't know, are people still, what retail establishments are still going to work. But I think people are still going to be going out to eat. And my tenant is putting a whole lot of money into this building, as are we. So they're fully invested with a 15-year lease on this property, 30-year, but 15-year guarantee. And add value to the property along the Big Beaver corridor. This is a $7 million project without the value of the land. So this is a lot of money going into this project along Big Beaver Road. So in answer to your question, I'm jumping around, but
you're good.
People will not be stumbling out of this place at 2 o'clock in the morning. The bar closes an hour after the kitchen closes, so it'll close at 11:30 on the weekends. It's not a happy hour bar type of place. We picked it for this neighborhood because of that reason. We had other options. One of the earliest ones we had there was a Tilted Kilt. We felt that's kind of like Twin Peaks or Hooters. We didn't feel that was right for the neighborhood. We didn't want another just cookie cutter strip center with a massage and a Subway. We wanted something special for Big Beaver. We think this is it. We think it's the right restaurant for the neighborhood. It's a Napa-style tasting room and winery. And so we think that's it. Is there any other questions?
I have one more.
Yes.
I'm just trying to do my due diligence here. You're talking what the variance we're looking for affects 14 parking spaces.
Yes.
How many total parking spaces are
there? There are 140.
And how many are they minimally required? for that type of facility?
I didn't come prepared with that
Yeah,
information.
I can tell you, it's 140.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, it's based on the number of seats, not the facility. So it's a number of seats in the restaurant, and for the economics of everything involved is 140 seats is required, and we know that that's going to be sufficient. And if it's not, it's going to be sufficient.
Thank you. I just didn't know. I didn't know if there was more.
And the side there is being used.
Sir, you have to identify yourself first. Thank you.
My name's David Hunter. I am an engineer working for PEA. I did the site plans.
Thank you. Please proceed.
I'm sorry. I apologize. And I just wanted to point out that that side of the building is also being used for a valet parking, possibly, and it'll be a drop-off area also for cars. So,
Thank you. Anyone else for these petitioners' representatives? If you can have a seat, please. Thank you. Vice Chairman Nogales, can you please share with us any communications we have on these matters?
We have the Planning Commission meeting minutes from 1 week ago. A lot of the background was already talked about, and it also gave set up that they needed 2 variance requests passed by us.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to open the public hearing. If you'd like to address the board on this matter, please proceed to the podium and be recognized. If you're here to address the board on this matter, please proceed to the podium and you will be recognized. And if you're not coming to the podium to be recognized, I'm about to close out the public hearing. And I don't see anybody coming, so we're closing out the public hearing. Back to the board for possible action, staff questions, and further comments. Member of the board, Mr. McCauley.
Since I'm the only one speaking about this, I like the idea of this. I think that fits real well. My only concern, and I don't think it's our concern here, is the logistics of how they put items on the site other than for these variances. But my concern is for the residents with the egress. My concern is for that more than anything else. Otherwise, I think that it fits. I think what they're putting here, they're absolutely correct in that it fits where it goes in there. And now it's a question of making sure that the residents are happy with it too, because they're the ones that are going to have to live with it on a daily, nightly basis. And not that we do, but hopefully they look at the setbacks, they look at the open space, how they're going to put foliage and things in there to make it appealing and for the whole residents. But that's a planning commission issue, I think.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. McCauley. I would agree. These finite details are important to the residents. Certainly abutting a residential area. If I lived there, I'd be concerned. But egress, ingress, right lane, or no right turn, left, no right turn, those are issues for like planning. They're skilled at dealing with those things. And I've been in Troy for a long time, and I remember a lot of pushback from this concept about, not having parking in the front, which was the old school, call me old guard, right? And so I don't think there's an issue here. I can't see an issue. It sounds like it's a wonderful project. And there's nothing that would retort us from moving forward on this, because the problem isn't running with the land that we normally deal with these residential properties. It's more running with the city ordinance about parking and side lot, front lot. It's a little bit perplexing. I just, when I see these things and I see a business investor wanting to invest in the Troy, I'm concerned that we sometimes chase away business investors because of man-made pitfalls that we create to say, you can't do this, you can't do that. This seems like an amazing project. It doesn't matter if they're putting out a beautiful, and we saw the images of this beautiful new building. It doesn't matter if it's going to be a beautiful new restaurant, which I'm sure is going to be amazing, or retail. The petitioner's representative talked about, we don't know where retail is going. It's really not our concern here. Our concern is, should a business be able to operate on this parcel without government interference from zany ordinances. And I understand the master plan regarding Big Beaver. That's not our scope. We had nothing to do with that here at the zoning board. But, I mean, clearly this is a parcel that merits, our approval for this project because of the man-made problem that was caused within that, Big Beaver master ordinance. So I'm going to be voting yes, and I'll share with my colleagues if they'd like to share any more. Any other member? Mr. Desmond? No?
Well,
Vice Chairman Nagalis?
I'll formalize something here.
Sure,
Put in
please.
a motion here.
Thank you.
The exceptional characteristics of the property are obvious. There's 3 roads, 3 front yards, essentially. They're related to the premises. They're not of personal nature. They belong to the property. It wasn't created by the current or previous owner. This is just a little twist or a quirk to the zoning ordinance, and it won't alter the essential characteristics of the neighborhood. Essentially, we have commercial buildings, we have high-end restaurants, we have parking lots up and down Big Beaver. If nothing else, it'll blend right into everything else in the neighborhood. So my motion is to grant the variance.
Second.
Motion for approval, seconded by Mr. Desmond. Are there any other members who would like to be recognized? Mr. Lambert.
Just a comment that I know our scope on this is pretty narrow, and I think clearly the motion is in order, and I'll be supporting it. And I would count on the Planning Commission to make sure that the residents' concerns are taken into account. But I would like to salute the property owners for finding an excellent restaurant for this site, because I've been to both the Cooper's Hawk at Partridge Creek and also in Naperville, Illinois, and this will be a great asset to the community. So thank you. A good job on finding a good tenant.
Great. Any other member of the board? Seeing none, Mr. Evans, we're prepared for a vote.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Mr. Kaltsunis?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Agawas?
Yes.
Mr. Desmond?
Yes.
Mr. McCauley?
Yes.
Congratulations, you have your variance.
Thank you.
Have a very good end of the year. I'm sure you will. Number 6, communications. Mr. Evans, do you have anything for us?
I do not.
Wonderful. And of course, we move on to miscellaneous business. Is there any other business? Are there other business items? Mr. Lambert.
Mr. Evans, there was something funny with the agenda for this meeting tonight where we didn't get kind of the lead in for each business item. It seemed like it jumped right to a map without the lead in. So
perhaps an intro page? Okay.
Yeah, it was kind of missing this time. So if that could be put back for the next meeting.
We can definitely do that.
Appreciate it.
You bet.
Any other member on miscellaneous business? None? Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Desmond.
Thank you.
I remembered your name. Public comment. If you'd like to address the board on any matter, including Mr. Desmond's name, please come to the podium and be recognized, and we will recognize you. Any member of the public who would like to be addressed, please present themselves to the podium at this time. Final call for anyone who would like to address the board on any public comment. Seeing that there aren't any, we're going to close that portion out. Is there anything else that we're missing, forgetting about, or not addressing? Well, everybody have a blessed Christmas, Happy New Year, and we will see you in the new year. Be safe and look forward to seeing everyone here soon. Thank you. We're adjourned.